The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a brand new virtual machine in Virtualbox, and I'll be doing the setup on there. You may want to do this too prior to, installing Arch Linux on your production machine, just so you've at least gone through the steps, on a virtual machine and got the machine working. So I'm going to go ahead and create my virtual machine. I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to call this Arch Linux Install Test. And then I'm going to give it 2 gigabytes of memory. And I'm also going to do 60 gigabytes of hard drive space. For the hard disk file type, VDI is fine. You can leave it as is, and dynamically allocated is fine. This is just a test machine. And I'm going to go in here and click on Create. So here's my new machine. I'm going to right click on it and go into Settings. And there's a few things I'm going to do in here. Number one, I'm going to click on System. And you'll see that underneath the Motherboard tab, Enable EFI, I'm going to leave that unchecked, because if that is checked, these setup instructions that I'm going to go through with Arch aren't going to work on the system, because it would have to be configured for a UEFI. So to use the legacy BIOS master boot record, this needs to be unchecked. Second, we need to go into processor. You can leave it at 1 CPU if you want. I mean, this is going to depend on your system requirements or how much hardware you have in your machine, but I'm going to bump that up to 2 to make everything a little bit faster. And then I'm also going to go under display, and I'm going to max out the video memory. Instead of 16 megabytes, I'm going to do 128. Monitor count set to 1, that's fine. And I'm going to go into storage, and I am actually going to attach my Arch Linux ISO image to my IDE controller. Then I'm going to click OK. And then I am ready to start this virtual machine. Select the Arch Linux ISO and then click on Start. Okay, I'm at the first screen you'll see when you attach your ISO image to your machine and you boot it up for the first time. So this is the screen before you actually get into the Arch Linux install. So all you have to do is press Enter to get into the Arch Linux installer. But I want to pause here because I want to point something out. You'll see that we have the Arch Linux graphical banner at the top, and we got a, kind of this wallpaper on this setup menu. And then it also says Arch Linux Install Medium x86-64 BIOS. If your screen does not have the Arch Linux graphical wallpaper, and instead of BIOS here it says UEFI, your machine is configured for UEFI mode, and these instructions will not work for you. You'll have to go into your motherboard settings and either switch the UEFI to the BIOS legacy BIOS mode, or whatever your motherboard manual tells you to do. So this looks good to me, and I'm actually going to press Enter to get into the installer. And we're waiting for the kernel and all the drivers to load. All right, and everything's loaded here. So before we start typing in commands and getting everything set up, I'm going to kind of show you what I'm going to be doing here. So there is this installation guide on the Arch Linux wiki. So I'm basically going to go through this installation guide almost exactly and set up Arch Linux on how we're told to do it based on the Arch Linux website. The other page that we'll be referencing is another page on the Arch Linux wiki, and this is to set up our boot manager. And then there's another page on how we're going to set up our partitioning. So on the partitioning page on the Arch Linux wiki, there's the UEFI layout example, BIOS MBR layout example, and BIOS GPT layout example. We're going to do the BIOS master boot record example here. So that's what we'll be referencing. So we're going to get over to the installation guide. And one of the first things it has us do is set the keyboard layout. I do not have to do this because I'm using a standard US keyboard. If you're outside of the US or using a non-standard United States keyboard, you're going to have to configure your keyboard. So you would just do the ls/user/share/ebd/keymaps ***/map.gz, and that's actually going to list out all the available keyboards or key maps that you can select from. Once you find your key map that you want to use, you'll use a command called load keys and the name of your key map. So I'm not going to change mine, but I will type in this first line just so you can see that it does list out all the different keyboards that you can choose from. All right, so we'll do ls user share abd key maps and ***/***.map.gz. And there's all the different keyboard key maps that we can use. And then let's say if I wanted to do, let's do load keys, then I could do de-latin if that was the key map I wanted to use. All right, so I'm going to clear my screen because I don't need to update that for my install here. The next thing that we're going to want to do is verify the boot mode. So I kind of talked about UEFI when we chose to go continue through the installer. When we put our ISO image in, we get that startup screen for Arch Linux. I talked about looking at that BIOS, or does it say UEFI? Arch Linux has you verify in these instructions to make sure that you know if you're using UEFI or not. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So basically what this says is we're going to list the files in this location. And if we get an error message, we're not using UEFI. If we get a listing, we are using UEFI. So I'll switch over to my Arch install. We'll do ls/sys/firmware/EFI/EFI vars and no such file directory. Now, if you got a listing here, watch my other video on how to set up Arch Linux using UEFI. I'm going to clear the screen. For the next step is to connect to the internet. So there's a command called IP link that you can use to look at all your network devices. So if I switch over here, type in IP space link. So there's my network devices. We can also do a ping, and I'll do archlinux.org. We'll ping it 4 times. I have an internet connection. If your machine is hardwired using an Ethernet connection and it's getting your IP addresses from, like a DHCP server on your router, you should have no problem setting up, or you shouldn't have anything additional that you need to do with your Arch Linux install. However, if you are using wireless, there's going to be some extra steps that you're going to have to take. So the Arch Linux documentation refers to using this utility called IWCTL to set up your Wi-Fi. And if we switch over to the install, if I do IWCTL, there's a help command in here that you can run, and it's got all the commands on how you can list devices, connect to your network, type in your password, list known devices, and all of that. So I don't need to do that, so I'm actually going to quit out of that. And I pinged archlinux.org and I got a response, so we're all good there. The next step that we're going to end up doing is we're going to update our system clock. So we're going to turn the network time protocol on. We're going to enable that. So it's time date CTL space set-NTP equals to true. Before I run that command, I'm actually going to do time date CTL space status. And you'll see that our time zone is set to UTZ, all zeros. We'll set the time zone later on. But take a look at system clock synchronize. It's set to no. So we'll do time date CTL set-NTP for network time protocol space true. Now if I up arrow a couple times and do our time date CTL status, you'll see that system clock synchronize is now set to yes. All right, so the next thing we need to do is partition the disks, just like the documentation says. So we'll be doing this using Fdisk. You can also do this using Fdisk, and I actually prefer to use Fdisk, but I'm actually going to be following the instructions here as close as possible. So for this install, I'll be using Fdisk to set up all of our partitions. So for our partitions, it's actually got the table right here, BIOS with MBR. So basically, we're going to set up two partitions. The first one's going to be swap, and then the second one is going to be our root partition, and it's going to take the remainder of the space. And I'm actually going to, since this virtual machine is configured for 2 gigabytes of RAM, I'm going to times that by 2, and I'm going to use 4 gigabytes for my swap file. If we go over to the partitioning page on the Arch Linux install, it gives you a little bit more information in this table. So for our root partition, we do need to set the boot flag to yes. Otherwise, our machine isn't going to boot. And the swap partition is set up as partition number 1, and partition number 2 is going to be the root partition. Let's do an Fdisk --L. It's going to list our hard drives. You can see that /dev/SDA. It's my Virtualbox hard drive, and that's at about, it's 60 gigabytes, and that's what we configured it for when we set up this virtual machine. So you can be careful here because you might have multiple hard disks. So if you do this next step, you might wipe out some of your data if you're not doing this correctly or not configuring the right hard disk. My setup's pretty easy because I just have the one hard disk attached to this machine. So I'm going to do Fdisk /dev/SDA. So how we'll do this, remember, 2 partitions, 1 swap, and 1's our root partition. We'll set up swap first. If you don't know how to use this utility, you can press M, which is going to give you kind of all the commands and what they do here. So I think P, if you type in P, it'll list your partitions. We haven't set up anything, so my partition list is blank. The N key is add new partition, so that's what we'll go ahead and do. And then since this is going to be for swap, I will do E for extended. Partition number, I'm going to use the default of 1. First sector, leave as default. And then since I want 4 gigabytes for my swap file, this will be different for everyone. So choose how much you want to use. We need to do +4G and hit enter. And then that's been done. Now we have to set the type. So there's another command for this. It's called T, change the partition type. And then we have to enter the hex code or alias. If you don't know the hex code, type L to list them all. So this is going to be swap. So we want our hex code here is going to be, or our number is going to be 82. So I'm going to type in 82. And it changed the partition from extended to Linux swap. Now let's go ahead and create our another partition, which is going to be our root partition. So we'll type in N. We'll do primary, because we'll be booting off this one. And then the partition number, this will be partition number 2. So I'll just hit enter for the default 2. First sector, that's fine. And then I'm just going to use the default because we want to use the remaining space. So that's been done. Now we want to set the type. So I'll type in T. And we want to set the type for number 2. And the hex code is going to be, the type is going to be number 83. And then press enter. There's one more very important step that we need to do, and that's going to be toggle the boot flag. So we'll type in A, and we want the boot flag to be set on number 2, and that's already set as the default, so I'm just going to press enter. Last, we need to save our work, so we'll type in W, which is going to write our table to the disk, and it's going to exit the utility. All right, so far so good. So we just got done partitioning our disks. Now we need to format the partitions. So right here. So we're going to do a make file system extended 4, and that'll be our root partition, which is in our case /dev/sda2, because remember swap is on sda1. Then we'll make our swap file. We will mount our root partition, and then we're going to turn our swap on. So going back to our install, we'll do mkfs, just how the documentation is having us do that. Make file system ext4 /dev/sda1, or sorry, sda2. Now, if you're not sure or don't remember what everything is here, just do another fdisk --l. It's going to list your partitions on your drive. So mkfs .ext4 /dev/sda2. And that's been done. So we'll make swap, mkswap /dev/sda1. That's done. Now we'll mount our rep partition. So we'll do mount /dev/sda2 /mnt for mount. And now we'll turn our swap on. We'll do swap on /dev/sda1. All right. Next step is we have the Arch Linux installation. So it'll have you select your mirrors in here. So there's a file where you can select your mirrors. If you use the default mirror list, that's typically fine. I mean, if you have an outdated version of the Arch Linux ISO, like really outdated, the mirror list that the installer comes with might be outdated. So you might want to update your mirror list, which you could just download the latest ISO and it's got the updated mirror servers on there. However, you can select, so there's a link in here for mirror servers. There's actually a tool in here. So let's see. Is it mirror status? Here's a listing of all the different mirrors that you can choose from. So there's another page somewhere on their website where you can actually, like, I think there's some drop downs where it'll give you more in an advanced search. So you might choose a mirror that's maybe closer to you geographically if the installer's slow. So it's up to you. If you did want to update your mirrors, it's in this file called etsy/pacman.d/mirror list. So if you wanted to, you can go in and do, you can use like Nano or Vim, whichever text editor you're familiar with. I'm a Vim user, so I can do vim/etsy/pacman.d/mirror list. And here's all my different mirrors in here. So I typically won't remove any of the mirrors in here because I use those as maybe a fail safe. Like if one of these top mirrors doesn't have a good connection, at least it will try the next one, try the next one, try the next one. If you do want to set a mirror in here, you can press I to get into insert mode and then do server equals https:// whatever mirror you want in here, and then save the file. I'm going to press escape to get out of insert mode. I'm just going to leave it how it is. Quit out of there. So let's start our installation. Now, to install all the essential packages, we use a command called pacstrap. We're installing it to mount, and we're doing base, Linux, and Linux firmware. I actually do a few more packages rather than just these essential packages. Like I'll go in here and install Vim or Nano so that once my machine boots, I have a good text editor to use so I can finish configuring the system. So, and it actually tells you down here that this is the time where if you want to put a text editor on here or necessary software for networking or all that stuff, now's the time to do that. Otherwise, you can do it later. So let me switch back over, and we're going to do a pack strap. Install everything to mount, and we'll do base, Linux, and then Linux dash firmware. And I'm also going to put Vim on here as well. It's downloading everything now, so this is going to depend on your internet connection. So we'll wait for this to complete, and then I'll be back. Okay, and our installation was successful. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to configure the system. So there's this file system table generator that we need to do. So let's go ahead and do that. It's gen file system table, gen fs tab, space dash capital U, mount, where we mounted our root partition, and then greater than mount etc fs table. Let's go ahead and run that. And that's been done. So now we'll change into our root partition on our new system that we just installed. There's a special command that we use to do this. It's called arch-chroot. And it would help if I could spell that. So arch-chroot space-mnt. And we are now on our newly installed system. So pretty much everything now is just configuring our new system. So there's a few things that we're going to do. We'll do all of our time zone stuff. Finish configuring the clock. There's some locale settings that we need to do in here, and languages. If you had set up your keyboard using a different key map other than the default US key map, you'll have to configure that in this vconsole config file that's stored in the etc folder. And there's going to be some networking stuff that we're going to have to do, and we'll configure our boot manager. So I would say we're about halfway done right now. Okay, so now we'll set up our time zone. I'm actually going to clear the screen. So to do our time zone, I like to use a command called time-date-ctl set-time zone, and then do America/Chicago, because that's where I'm located at. Now, if you don't know the country or city or what you can choose from, you can do an ls to user/share/zone-info. And here's all the regions you can choose from. So you have America, Africa, Australia, Brazil, so on and so forth. So once you found your region that you want to use, you can type in, do an up arrow, you get to the same command, and do /America, and then it's going to list the cities you can choose from. So you will choose the closest city to you, and I'm going to select Chicago. So we'll do time-date-ctl set dash, let's do status first. You can see that currently my time zone is just UTC 0. We'll do time-date-ctl set dash time zone, and we'll do America/Chicago. Then if we do time-date-ctl status again, you'll see that my time zone is correct here. So our time zones are done. So we'll do HW clock, SYS to HC. Okay, that's good. So now we need to set up our locales. Now, it says we need to update or edit this etc/locale.gen file and uncomment en us utf -8 So this is going to be dependent on where you're at. If you use something other than this, so you'll choose what you typically set there. So I'm going to go into, open up Vim /Etsy/ locale.gen. Use nano if you're familiar with nano. And I'm going to press the J key to go down until I find ENUS. Is right there. I'm going to press I to get in insert mode, delete the hash, which is used as a comment in this file. So we're uncommenting this line. I'm going to press escape to get out of insert mode, :W to write, Q to quit. And then what we do is we do locale-gen, and it's generating all of our locales based on US UTF-8. And the generation has been complete. So now we need to go into another file. So it's vim /Etsy/locale.config. And we'll set our language in here. So capital LANG is equal to. So just do it how they have it in the Arch wiki. I'm going to write and quit, and that's been done. Now's the time if you have a custom key map, not a custom key map, but a different key map other than United States, you go vim or nano /Etsy/v console.config, and you would set your keyboard in here just how you would have done that on the very first step. I don't need to set that. Now we need to configure our network. We're going to set our host name for our machine. Then we're also going to create our host file. So I'm going to go into Vim, Etsy, host name, I to get an insert mode, and then I'm just going to I'll do Zeus for my host name, escape to get out of insert mode, W to write, Q to quit. And that's been done. Now we'll configure our host file. So we'll do vim Etsy hosts. And then we'll do 127. And I'm just copying this directly from the Arch installation wiki. 127.0.0.1 tab, and we'll set this to localhost. And then our IP6 address, ::1. This is going to be localhost as well. Then we'll do 127.0.1.1. And then we're going to do whatever name you would have set for your host file, your host name, dot local domain space your host name. So we'll type in Zeus there. Press escape to get out of insert mode, :W to write, Q to quit. Check to make sure you don't have any spelling errors. Remember, things are case sensitive. Now we'll set our root password. So we'll do pass WD and set a password. Root password's done. Now we get into the bootloader. So for the bootloader, the Arch wiki has the Grub bootloader settings in here. So we need to install Grub first. So we'll install Grub, and then we're going to end up making our Grub config file. So I'll show you how to do all that. So we need to install Grub. So we'll do pacman /S and then do Grub. We'll proceed with the install. We'll do grub-install, and we'll install this on /dev/SDA. Notice I didn't put any numbers behind SDA, so it's the device that we're putting in here. Now we'll do our grub-make-config, mkconfig -space-o /boot/grub/grub efg. So the other thing that we'll end up doing is once we restart the machine, we're not going to have internet access because we don't have any sort of networking or networking services and systemd enabled. So first we'll download networking tools. So we're going to do pack man space dash capital S, and then we're going to do network manager. Proceed with the install. Okay, that's done. So now we'll enable the service. We'll do systemctl enable network manager. And that's been done. So at this point, we'll exit. We'll unmount. Space dash capital R MNT. And then we'll do a reboot. I'm actually going to see how we got the Arch Linux installer again. I'm actually going to power off. Then I'm going to go into the VM settings here. And then under storage, I'm going to remove the install disk from this virtual machine. And here is our Grub bootloader. And here's Arch Linux. And here's, you can see how we have Zeus here. That's what we set for a host name. I'll log in as root and then type in my password. And then here we are. So we are fully installed. Let's see if I have internet connection. Ping archlinux.org 5 times. And I have an internet connection. Now, if you were doing Wi-Fi for your setup, you'll have to configure your Wi-Fi again, since we're now on the installed system. So that's something you'll have to do. And then from this point, you can install additional packages from the AUR. You do pacman dash capital S, and you might put git on here. That's one of the first tools that I install on here, just so I can pull down my dot files. You can install Xorg if you want a Windows server on here. If you're going to put like GNOME or KDE or some sort of window manager, full-blown desktop on your machine. But I'm actually going to create a quick user account on here. So, because I don't want to keep using my root account. So I'll do user add space dash M to create the home directory for this user. And I'm going to call this user Jason. And then I'm going to add this, well, let's set the password first. So pass WD space the account that you want to set the password for. Pass WD, it'd help if I typed it right. Set the password here. So that's been done successfully. And I'm going to add this user to a couple groups. So we'll do user mod space dash lowercase a capital G. And I'll add my user to the wheel account, video account, audio, group, storage, group, and then space dash the user I want to add to those groups. Now, since I'm going to be using my JSON account to install software as a super user, I need to configure the Sudoers file. So I'm going to go into vim /sudoers. I typed it wrong. Sudoers. Oh, okay. I know what's wrong. I didn't install sudo. So pacman space dash S sudo. Yes, I want to proceed with the installation. So now if I clear vim /etc /sudoers, here's our file. We'll go to the bottom line here, and then I'm going to uncomment this line, which will allow my account to use sudo. And since I'm part of the wheel group, I'll be able to execute any command under my JSON account. So I'm going to do :W to write, Q to quit, and since this is a system file, I'll have to put the exclamation point in here to force the write and quit. Then if we reboot one more time, make sure we can log in with our new user account. We'll do JSON, a password, And let's test this out. So let's do sudo pacman --s xorg. Prompt for my password again, since I'm using super user. Yes, I want all those packages. Yes, proceed with the install. And it's working. So that's about it for our Arch Linux install using the master boot record and Grub for our boot manager. So I hope this video helped. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this that I put out. And I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, everyone.